Welcome everyone, and I just wanted to get a big thank you to the Association of Lifelong Learners on behalf of the Presque Isle Township Museum Society for working with us on our first ever webinar, and particularly to Eugene Cambre, one of our board members who has put this presentation together, and you're in for a real treat seeing all of his amazing drone photography. I would also like to thank the Besser Museum of Northeast Michigan. Eugene and I are sitting in the museum right now after hours, which was very gracious of them, and hosted by Chris Witolski, the executive director of the Besser Museum, because they have excellent bandwidth, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't have any problems because some of this photography is pretty large scale. So I hope you have a wonderful evening tonight. Obviously, this is a free webinar, but we always welcome donations to Museum Society to help us take good care of our lighthouses. Thank you. And thank you, Dick Bremer, for your great work on this. You've been awesome.
Well, it's been fun working with you folks, and yeah, I'm thankful Besser is allowing you to use an outstanding internet connection, because with Eugene's videos, you need all the bandwidth you can get. But just as a starting point here from a Q&A viewpoint, Eugene has asked that we hold, he'll answer questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to, if you're on Zoom, put in a question anytime on chat. We'll just hold it to the end. And if you're on Facebook Live, just make a comment and we'll work through those questions as we get to them. Also, Eugene will be leaving his email address, so feel free to contact him via email if you have any questions. So with that, Eugene, take off.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for participating tonight. A number of things that we're going to talk about. A number of those things are going to be fact, and then some of them are going to be opinion, as setting some guidelines for drone photography and camera photography as well. So just a little bit about me. I was born in Pennsylvania, and in 5 years, we went to kindergarten, walked below 0 temperatures to school, and then moved to Texas. So at 60 years in Texas, it was the 60th year that I lost my northern accent. So we had a vacation home up here in Presque Isle, and when I started seeing the beauty of this area, I went ahead and retired, and we made this a permanent home. And then I totally upgraded my camera equipment and my drone. I have one of the better drones that's out there on the market today. So I had started off with a really inexpensive one, which if you don't have one and you're thinking about getting a drone, it's a great idea to get a really cheap one and practice. When you step up to a more sophisticated drone, there are some issues that you don't want. No, you don't want to run it into a tree like I did. So with that, we are celebrating the 150th anniversary of the lighthouse that you see before you, which is the 1870 lighthouse. And down below in the right-hand corner of a number of my photos, you might see a little description there. So here are some of the topics that we're going to talk about tonight on drones. It'll be types, brands, safety, pilot license, know your drone, drone quality, camera quality, video quality, GPS, storage, GEO fencing, flight times, functions, lighting, weather, and then finally editing pictures and internet and YouTube resources. And by the way, that picture is the 1840 lighthouse there that's on the screen. So there's my email if you would get a chance to write that down, and I'll be able to respond to your any of your questions. So here we are with the Aerial Frontier. That actual drone right there is the one that I'm using. This is capable of going 5 miles to 6 miles out, possibly 5 or 6 miles high, but it is restricted, and I will not defeat that restriction. Is set to 400 feet. Above that, planes are not allowed to go below 500 feet. So can you imagine bypassing that software that prohibits you from going above 400 and running it into an airplane. I couldn't live with that. So I keep mine at 400 feet or less. A gentleman in Russia sent his up 25,000 feet. It was a pretty amazing video, but maybe he was in Siberia or something. So types of drones, and you can just see from this picture here, this is just a scattering of drones. They range from about $10 to 64 million. So the $64 million drone that you'll see a picture of later on, that of course is military. Most of these copters are quadcopters, but there are some that have 6 blades. So there's a lot of choices, and to narrow down into a specific drone, it will depend on what your skill level is, or what your, is it just for fun or for sport or to make money? Those are the things you have to decide. So once again, picking the right drone. There are so many brands out there. DJI is a pretty good brand. It's the one I wound up choosing after 2 years of research. Down below, you'll see the word Autel, A-U-T-E-L. That particular manufacturer also makes the diagnostic equipment for automotive. So they have a pretty darn good drone as well. My first drone was a Parrot. I got that for about $80, and it taught me a lot about how to operate a drone. Even with that experience, I still took my more sophisticated drone and ran it into a tree. Oh, it's just a lot of learning that takes. So it was all fun, and it didn't hurt it. But brand choice, there's a lot of information that you could look at on YouTube, where there's a lot of people will make comparisons with the different brands. So we're going to talk about some safety topics in the category of knowing your surroundings. So this picture right here, who would send their drone up with these kind of conditions? My particular drone has sensors 360 degrees. So it won't run into that car, it won't run into that building, or probably that light post, but it's not going to see those wires. That's just how it is. So we're going to talk about overhead, water, buildings, people, animals, airports, and your controller. So when it comes to overhead, check for electrical wires, antennas, guy wires, and there's other objects that you can be looking for, tree branches that are real wispy. So the bottom right picture there is a guy wire that goes up to a radio tower. There's a number of stories of people hitting these things. They might take their drone and center it on a particular subject and then run their drone around it in a circle and forget that there's telephone wires or guy wires. So the best thing to do is, especially when you're learning, is to get out into an open field if possible and learn your drone inside out. Then you can move into more delicate areas. So when it comes to water, here's a picture that I took with my drone. And the interesting thing about it is it's so crystal clear that you see a mirror image of these ice crystals that look like they are below the water. So having read up for 2 months before I put my drone up in the air about things that people do to ruin their drone, one of them was not finding out if your sensors are accurate as to telling you how high your drone is. So I got on my driveway and I set it up 5 feet in the air, got my tape measure while it was hovering, and realized it was 5 feet in the air. Okay, that's great. So now let's say you're at the beach and you're in a murky water. It's probably going to be pretty accurate to know that it's 5 feet from the surface of the water. But in this particular picture, and in this particular case, with our crystal clear lakes and rivers, when I put my drone out, which was 5 feet off the ground, I sent it out over the water and it thought it was between 8 and 9 feet off the ground. So when you think about that, and your drone is, say, like it's a half mile out to 5 miles out, and you want to lower it to take a picture of something close in the water, and all of a sudden this thing will be in the water because the sensor's reading the bottom of the lake or the bottom of the river and giving you a false reading. So just be sure that it would be good to test your drone, send it out over the water with your eyes fixed to your drone, and lower it and watch your readings on your controller so that when it's, let's say 3 feet, are you like 1 foot away from the water, 10 feet away from the water? So you have to make some mental adjustments. So the bottom line is if you get over crystal clear water, just probably forget what your controller says and pay close and strict attention to the drone itself. And the measure and compare part was, once again, set your drone up within arm's reach and measure how high it says on your controller versus the tape measure. Comes to buildings, there are some that are going to be hard to miss, and the drone won't miss them. It'll actually stop. Now, there are drones out there. In the case of the one I had, the first one, my Parrot, it doesn't see those buildings. It doesn't have a sensor, so I could literally run it right into it. I could try that with my new one, but it won't go. It'll stop, and it'll give me a warning. But you can see why you have to pay attention. You have to know your surroundings. And like in case of that mirrored building at the bottom right, the drone may not even see that at all. There are, I think mine has the sonar, so it's going to pick up on obstructions. When it comes to safety, let's talk about people for a minute. So like here's a nice beach scene, and you go out there and start buzzing around with your drone, and you think, hey, this is really pretty. And then look at all those people down there. They might be having a wedding. They might be having some kind of a party, or just wanting some peace and quiet. So you have to, try to consider, are you invading their privacy? And the same thing goes for if you're shooting drones in a neighborhood. And I have heard these complaints before. People buzzing somebody's backyard, or maybe they're not, and they're just going over to another, to the picture of a lake or something. But people see that and they think they're being buzzed. So just kind of be thoughtful about where you are and maybe avoid going over people's homes if possible. They are considered quite an annoyance, and some people are dazzled by them. So once again, just make awareness a part of the drone fun. And target practice. Well, we've all heard about stories of drones getting shot at and shot down. Well, some people say, well, that's a federal crime, but good luck getting that prosecuted. So if you're out in the woods, pretty much you feel safe out there, but maybe somebody's doing something out there that they don't want to be seen. And so you might get some pot shots at your drone. Just be aware of your surroundings. Here we go with pets, animals, birds. It's good to know where they are. And I have been attacked by one hawk and 2 different seagulls. And they made a beeline for the drone. And fortunately, I'd had enough experience with my drone to get out of the way and perform some very evasive maneuvers. The hawk went after it twice. And I guess they get close enough, they realize it's really not what they were thinking. But again, they've been known to take them down. So you have to kind of remember, what will the reaction be? So I always keep my eye to the sky. And if I hear a seagull, or I'm just always looking around, I'm ready to bring that drone down as fast as possible. And then you've got pet owners out there walking their dog, or maybe somebody's holding their cat, and all of a sudden here comes this drone that might be too close to them, and the cat reacts to that and scratches at their owner, or a dog starts barking, wakens up the kid, or just be aware of pets. And say birds of prey, these things come out of nowhere. And you see in the bottom picture, this true photo of a dog that jumped up, the guy happened to catch that as the dog caught the drone. And it's either going to get a mouthful of propellers or a ruined drone. So keep all those things in mind as you're flying around. Okay, when it comes to airports and military sites, be aware of their locations. We'll talk about geofencing here in a minute. And there was a Florida photographer that I had met. I was doing a wedding photography in Florida. But anyway, I met this lady who has lost her drone to a military takeover. Well, she put her drone up in a place where she really shouldn't have. In fact, I was at that spot and my drone would not even take off. Somehow she overrode that drone advice. And she literally watched on her controller as she had no longer any control over it, and the military sent it out to the Gulf of Mexico to disappear. And she wasn't about to complain because she would have been in a lot of trouble if they'd have found out who it was. So basically, if you're looking at this through your controller and your drone is seeing this, that's a big oops. You want to get out of there. So be aware and be sure that you update your geofencing, which we'll talk about in a minute. So the controller warnings. So look at all this data here. That's mission control to captain overload. You need to get to know all of your controller warnings and functions, those calibrations, the updates, the wind warnings. You're going to want to know your camera and video settings too, because you can change those on the fly. You might be going over some snow and ice, and it's so bright that you wind up with a lousy video. And that's what happened to me. I did not know my controller enough, and I did not know the settings. So I found out later it was a very simple adjustment. But be prepared, know your warnings, and be able to do something about it. You could be sitting on the ground. I've done this many times where there's no wind and it gets up 200 to 400 feet and you get high wind warnings, bring the drone down now. So once again, just be aware and keep your eye on your controller. A pilot license. It's not necessary to have one if you're going to fly for pleasure, but it's great advice to get it. If you have that, you're not going to be really getting in any kind of trouble with a pilot license. So if you're going to do this for income, fly a drone for income, then they say that you have to have one or it could be a fine. So it does help to get in the door for the various possibilities of real estate or weddings or events, publications, education, training, sports. We could go on and on with the number of places where if you have a pilot license for unmanned drones, you could walk in and say, here's my equipment. Do you need any photography or videos done? And at the bottom of the screen there is the FAA.gov website to where you would log on to this and seek getting your pilot license. I do not have mine yet, but that is a plan for 2020. By the way, this photo here of this lighthouse was January of 2019. And later on, we'll see a picture of this after the Township of Presque Isle saw this and had that repaired, had that fixed. So it's a lot prettier now. So we're going to talk about some topics here, what I call know your drone, how to take off, how to land, how to get it home, geofencing, different modes, tracking, waypoints, flight times, controller battery, drone battery, backup battery, GPS, joystick settings for panning and speed and other things, and then the range of your drone. How to take off. You wouldn't think we'd have to talk about this, but trust me, for 2 months, I went over and over the details of this drone I had, not the first one, but the second one, because I didn't want to lose it. There's a couple of things that are extremely important. How to get it in the air, and even more importantly is how to get it back. Very, very important. So check your controller, go over and over the functions of how to take off. Some are different. The Parrot was very different from the DJI. Wind, what are the wind conditions? If you take it, set it up in the air, and you have a weak type of drone with weak batteries, you good enough wind up there, you can just watch it disappear and you won't have the power to get it back. The one that I have will go up to 40 miles an hour and handle 25 to 30 mile an hour winds. So it's pretty stout. The first one I had to look for trees moving around and things like that, wind gusts. So I didn't go very far with that. Know the weather. What's the weather going to be? What's the weather 200 to 400 feet up? What's the temperature? Know what your settings are for your drone on temperature. It might be 20 degrees, it might be 14, it might be 30 degrees of cold weather. Another thing that happens, if it's cold and you send it up, even though you came out of a warm car, for example, the battery starts chilling down at maybe a -20 wind chill. And the nature of most batteries is that when they start getting cold, they can't put out the amps and the volts, and it could literally drop out of the sky. So keep that in mind. By the way, this is the 1870 Lighthouse. That's about 130 feet up on a beautiful sunset out here in Presque Isle. How to land. Well, it's very important to know how. So every drone is just a little bit different. So what I would recommend is practice a few feet off the ground. If you're new to droning particularly, set it up set it up in the air 4, 5, 6 feet, and then bring it back down. And do that enough times where you're 100% comfortable with doing that. Clear your landing site. I would suggest getting a landing pad, but the reason you want to clear the landing site is to say if there's a bunch of tall grass. Well, those motors that are in most of these drones are pretty light duty, so they can't handle a lot of interruptions. They're made to just run through clear air. Plus, when you have snow or sand or dust, it has a tendency to suck that right through the motor. And that's why we don't ever run most all these, you do not run in moist conditions like snow, sleet, rain. So a clear landing site will pay off in the long run. You monitor this unit until that thing is on the ground. I had one where I just was ready to look away and it went back up in the air because I let go of a joystick, which told it up, go back up. So I fixed all that, but anyway, monitor your unit until it lands on the ground and then turn it off. And did you set your GPS? So, quick story about that. Somebody bought a new drone. In fact, it was one like mine, all the sophistication in the world. And he didn't read the instructions. He didn't set his GPS. Well, the GPS for that drone, guess what? It was China. So when he bumped the return to home setting, it took off. And he did not know how to cancel or exit that function. He did find it, so he had to get a hold of DJI, the manufacturer, and they told him how to find a map that is created whenever these things take off. The sophisticated units, anyway. He was able to go through the woods and track down and get his drone back. Some people have lost it forever. So if you have a GPS setting on your drone, be sure that I recommend that you set that every single time. Mine does it automatically. How to get it home. So be sure that you understand the instructions. In the case of the Parrot, the inexpensive one, it did have a way to get back, but it didn't seem to work very well. So I wanted to be sure I knew my drone. And in the case of the more sophisticated DJI, the Mavic drone, it does come back by itself if it loses connection. It's done that to me 3 or 4 times where I look at my controller and there's no connection. And here comes my drone. It's pretty cool. Lands right where it took off. Once again, be sure you have a clear landing site. So if you do have that return to home function, why would we set it to, let's say, 130 feet, maybe more? And why? Well, because there's another guy out there who set his drone up in the sky, but actually was only about 30 feet up and hit the, it decided to come home because it lost connection. Well, it just ran straight into a building. It wasn't supposed to. The sensors were supposed to stop it, but all it knew was it was supposed to come home because of some malfunction. That's why you would set a drone to, let's say, 130 feet, or just look at your surroundings. If you have a 200-foot tree, then tell it to go 250 feet high, and then it will return it. So in other words, at 30 feet, if it can't connect to the controller anymore, it'll go up to whatever you've set it high, go up in the air, and then it will come over and hover over the spot where it took off, then come down. So that's why you set your GPS. That's why you set your height on the return to home function. Oops, compass calibration. If that's not set, even though it has GPS, it's going to think that if north becomes south or west, it's going to go to a different GPS location based on the compass. So be sure that your compass is always calibrated. Then once it's calibrated, you hardly ever have to do that again. But from time to time, your controller will tell you if you need to calibrate it again. But be sure to check it, check your controller. There are people that do this every single time, and I refuse to do that because it's never failed me. And once again, be sure you have a landing pad or a clear landing site. Now let's talk about geofencing. We talked about this earlier. So geofencing is a location-based service in which an app or other software uses GPS, radio frequency ID, Wi-Fi, or cellular data to trigger a pre-programmed action when a mobile device or a radio frequency ID tag enters or exits a virtual boundary set up by a geographical location known as a geofence. So those two pictures there, the red and the blue, let's just say that that's a military airport. So they put out coordinates that people who get their software updated, and mine is updated all the time, it gets those apps. And through that app, it gets those settings, and then it loads it into the controller and the drone. So I've been near one of these before, and I didn't even know it. I was in Atlanta, Michigan, and I wanted to send the drone up. Well, it wouldn't go up. It said either magnetic interference or something else. But turns out I was near an airport and I didn't even know it. So it's possible I could have sent that drone up if I overrode it and been 400 feet up, but somebody's trying to take off or land and run into the drone. That's the power of geofencing. So it's just basically predetermined locations to say, don't put your drone up in this area. I pay attention to those. I will never override my drone in those areas. On different flight modes, are you going to go 120 miles an hour? Because these guys have drones that will go 120 miles an hour. There's all kinds of different modes out there, from sports to beginner, heads free, first person view, altitude hold, loiter, stabilize, tripod, and more. So some of these in different drone manufacturers are kind of the same thing. But as a beginner, I would stick with that one. And then you get to sports mode, that's where your drone can just take off and go as fast as possible. So my drone, the more sophisticated one, I kept it on beginner, where I would go up to 20 miles an hour. And then when I hit sports mode, when I understood my drone, it would go to 30 and 40 miles an hour. So these guys right here, as you see in the picture, they're racing these drones. They have these goggles on that they're actually watching first-person view through their drone as it goes through an obstacle course at 120 miles an hour. Don't think I'm going to be doing that anytime soon. But those guys will have a lot of fun. So let's talk about tracking. And tracking is basically drones that follow you, and they're able to autonomously track a target without having to be piloted. So currently there's two main technologies that are used in the Follow Me feature, and they work in different ways to allow drones to track objects and autonomously and accurately. So as you see in the picture there, here's a guy holding his controller, and there's the drone. But the drone is basically focused in on this guy on the bicycle, and at some point it just takes off and follows this rider. So the tracking, or follow me, as they call it, is either going to be what's called GSC or recognition software. So once again, follow me is an intelligent flight mode, which turns your drone into the hands-free aerial camera crew. We're seeing two types of technology. One is GSC, a ground control station, with a follow me GPS transmitter technology. And then the latest one uses recognition software, such as the DJI Active Track. That is a trademark for the DJI brand. So the first one is the GSC. That would be like you put some kind of a transmitter in your shirt pocket, your hat, your belt clip, or on your bike, for example, or your car, and it sets a signal out that the drone follows. With the recognition software, you tell your drone to, with your controller, that this is the object I want to track, and then it does all the rest for you. So it recognizes a car or yourself or a surfboard, and it just follows that until you tell it otherwise. They really get sophisticated that it can actually follow a car, at least the recognition software can follow a car, and as it going through a tunnel, it realizes the pattern of the road that it's been on, plus the 3D map that's probably in the drone, and is waiting for it on the other side of the tunnel. So one of the bonuses of the recognition software is that it has obstacle sensing. And so when it's tracking a car or a motorcycle or a surfboard, the Mavic 2 brand can plan a flight path on its 3D map. It'll sense, recognize, and avoid obstacles in front of it and behind it, all the while shooting your target without interruption. It is a great drone option. That's Grand Lake Sunset, by the way, at 400 feet. You never know what you're going to see when you get that drone up in the air. It sure looks different up above. Okay, let's talk about hyperlapse. And this is it's actually time lapse, but they call it hyperlapse. So there's several modes, and one of them is, the first one is free mode. So in this mode, you can actually control the altitude of the drone as well as the camera's tilt, but you can't select a specific target for the drone to focus on. So this mode is a bit challenging to use, especially for beginners. So we might recommend starting with other modes before giving this one a try. I pretty much dove into the free mode, but it's hard to pan your drone and make it look pretty. So we'd talk about these other ones. Circle mode's the easiest of them all. It results in a smooth, pro quality hyperlapse video that is focused around a specific target. Let's say like a lighthouse. So you can't change the elevation of the drone, but you can select whether the drone flies clockwise or counterclockwise. And you got to make sure you look out for trees and power lines. So let's say you flew it up 130 feet in the air and you had the lantern room of the lighthouse as a target, then you could go left or right on your joysticks and it'll track and follow that lighthouse in a circle. Thanks for great video. Next one is course lock. So that's the one where you lock your drone's camera onto a specific object and then you set a course direction. So it's going to follow that course while maintaining focus on the target object. So you can also use course lock to shoot an object that is straight ahead. Simply make sure that the target is directly in the path of the drone's flying direction. So that's the case where if you want to go by the top of a lighthouse, then you lock onto the top of the lighthouse, and then as your drone flies from behind to beside it to past it, the camera will turn and keep its eye on it. Waypoint, this is pretty cool. So this is the mode that makes for a more interesting and dynamic hyperlapse video. The drone flies along a preset waypoint or waypoints. So it makes the hyperlapse video as it goes. So you can add a maximum of 5 waypoints. So for instance, you can increase the drone's altitude as it approaches a waypoint if you want to, and it will reveal, say, a magnificent sunset or a city skyline. And this is an example of a mapped out waypoint on a drone controller. So you start out with at the home and it will go to point 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then return right back to where it took off. And once again, when you see these on hyperlapse, so basically it's time lapse, you might be covering a 10-minute run that will wind up showing in about 1 or 2 minutes. It makes for great videos. Let's talk about flight times. And the average drone today is between 10 and 20 minutes. And the top of the range unmanned aerial vehicles are tapping out at about a half an hour. So that's where the Parrot that I used to have would go 5 to 8 minutes. And then now the one I have will go up to 30 minutes. But even having said that, no matter what drone you have, got to be watching your controller, because I've never actually got to 30 minutes up in the air. There's a number of things that slow that down, like wind, battery condition, temperature. But you could go 30 minutes in some of these, but it's just very important to keep your eye on your controller. So if you get one that goes about, let's say 5 or 10 minutes, you're going to get bored after you've mastered your flight operations, and you're going to want to go longer and longer. But it goes back to, what's your budget, what's your need. You can have a lot of fun with one that goes 5 or 10 minutes and just power up the battery and do it again. Now, how's that for a photo, by the way, of the 1840 and the 1870 lighthouses in the background? I don't know what that water was doing that day, but it was just gorgeous. So, controller and drone battery. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions. And there's a lot of talk about some of these having swollen batteries after some length of time. And they've been known to swell up as they were being used, though you may not realize it at the time you install it. And when that happens, it can eject itself and it just goes and crashes straight to the ground. Once that drone loses power, it's over with. It's not going to float back down. It's just going to crash. So always inspect your batteries. And then maybe, if I was you, maybe mark the day that you bought it and with a magic marker so you'll know how old it is. And then another thing is that maybe you could also write on the bottom of it with a magic marker that this one went 17, or let's say 25 minutes, and then 20 minutes, and then it's down to 15 minutes. And so you'll realize that your battery is going out. Time to get a new one. I advise not going into the aftermarket for drone batteries. I love the aftermarket for 1,000 different things, but when it comes to a drone replacement battery, I highly recommend you think about using the original manufacturer. They know what they're doing when they built this, and they built it for you to have the most fun. Crashing your drone with an inferior battery wasn't in their plan. Battery backup. So, you ask how many is too many? Well, let's say like you're going to take a bunch of pictures of a bunch of people at the lighthouse. It's got to go up and down, up and down. So they say, well, I just need 2 batteries. So you got one. As soon as you take one out, put the fresh battery in, you're trying to charge that one up. Well, you got to know how long it takes to charge it up. And sometimes it's an hour or 2. So just kind of get an idea of, are you going to do a wedding? Are you going to do 2 weddings back to back? Are you going to be out in the wilderness where you're not going to be able to get back to a charging station? Maybe I need 3 of them. So having extra batteries is great for long runs. You just have to figure out how many that you're going to need that'll fit you. Temperature extremes. Once again, if they're ice cold or really hot, your drone can drop right out of the sky. So just keep an eye on the conditions. Check your battery temperatures from time to time. And remember that wind also has a lot of effect on the battery. And something else that you might want to, when you land your drone, you might want to pop that battery out and feel it, make sure it's not super hot. That's a problem if it's getting hot. Okay, for GPS, I super recommend that is checked every single time. That way you get your drone back. So it's just like a car. It has to do 2 things. You have to be able to steer it, and you have to be able to stop it. You may not have to be able to start it, but if it's running, you must be able to steer it and stop it. And the same thing goes for the drone. If you can get it up in the air, it's critical that you can get that drone back. That's a major, major function. So with a GPS setting, if it's possible on your drone, make sure that is set every single time, and that makes it worry-free. Let's talk about storage for a moment. Several kinds of storage categories. So the memory chips that are like in the small little microchips, 32 gigabytes, probably as small as you want to go, but now that are up to 1 terabyte. So you have to use a class 10 chip. It doesn't pay to use anything less than a class 10. It is the fastest, most suitable chip for full high definition video recording and still recording. So with a drone like mine that comes in at 20 megapixels, you might be rapid firing, taking pictures, but if you have a lower class, like a class 2 or 3 chip, let's say, you may have to wait for moments for that to reload to where you can take another picture. So, and the class 2 is the slowest. It's suitable for standard definition video recording. Class 4 and 6 are both deemed suitable for high definition video recording, but you will be elated at the speed at which the class 10s operate. The other type of storage, just for a moment, is your unit. So, get something that it will keep it clean, dry, and vibration resistant. This photo here that you're looking at also, I was coming down out of the sky, and it was about 5 feet off the ground, and a fog rolled in as the sun was getting about 4 p.m. low in the sky. So what a neat setting that turned out to be. That's at the Presque Isle Marina. Okay, on the joysticks, on my original drone, the Parrot, I don't think there was very much I could change. And then we get to my new drone, the DJI Mavic. You want to be able to calibrate some of these speeds that these joysticks will operate your drone at. So for panning, that is the camera that is actually going from left to right. And so if you, at the very beginning, mine was just set for, I guess, high speed. So it makes it very jerky. And so you can go in and change the settings on your panning camera speed, the actual camera itself, as it swivels on the gimbals to slow down and makes it a lot smoother. But it depends on what you're doing. So most of the time, a slow pan is going to be much nicer because you're going to lose a lot of the picture as it pans too fast. The motorized gimbal speed is also adjustable. And once again, it's the things that you have to play with. As you look back at the videos that you've taken, you'll see where you might need to make some changes. The rotation speed is another joystick function. And that's where the entire drone spins around. Oh my gosh, that thing was fast on mine at the very beginning. So I've dialed that back down to where I can put my joystick all the way to the right, for example, and it's a smoother rotation speed. But it depends on what you want to do. Just to make adjustments that fit your needs. And once again, they have instructions on this in a manual, but you can also go on YouTube and get tons of help on this category. Let's talk about range. Check your model for the distance limitations and be cautious. So limits are both in miles and time are affected by wind and temperature. And we kind of discussed that already. So if you go out and you have a 30-mile-an-hour wind and it's a very cold day, don't think that your drone's going to go out 5 miles and come back. The neat thing about the one that I have is that it knows it's running a computer program the entire time it's up in the air. So it knows what the wind conditions are that it's already encountered. It's looking at the battery drain and calculating what it's going to take to come back. So it starts warning your controller. And in my particular drone, it's going to override me if I continue to try to run it. It knows that when it's down to about 10%, that it'll have about 10% when it lands. So as a battery gets towards the end of its drain, as it's draining, as it gets towards zero, it starts ramping up and using a whole lot more voltage and amps. So that's why I just kind of pay attention to your controller. Is it worth pushing those limits? Well, there was a video of a guy that sent his out 5 or 6 miles and it came back, but he showed the controller warnings. It was saying, hey, it's time to come back. And it's pretty neat to see a drone go out 5 miles. You can't even see the thing, but it has to be in line of sight. If it does, if you're sitting in a lawn chair and you're in the forest and you send it up in the air and you say, oh, look at that lighthouse, and you try to run your drone over that lighthouse, so as soon as it can't see that controller anymore, it's going to lose its connection. So hopefully you have the kind that will return to home. But if you don't, it's just going to keep going until it runs into the lighthouse or disappears. So keep that in mind. Now, how's that, by the way? That photo there was of the marina in the 1840 lighthouse not too long ago. Who would have thought it looks like that? You don't know that from the ground. Another reason to get a drone. Drone quality. Once again, you can go to YouTube, you can go to cnet.com, you can go to a number of sites where people will compare drones and they have some great, great tips. Look for durability. And in the case of, do you need a care kit? That might be $125, for example. So if you crash it with that care kit purchase, then you can send it off to the manufacturer and then they'll repair it or give you a refurb unit and get you back in business. Or you could look at an insurance policy. There's people out there saying that they have a State Farm insurance, for example. It only costs $75 a year. I have not checked that out yet, but with the insurance policy, if it goes in the lake, crashes, disappears, gets stolen, then you get another drone. Okay, construction, once again, check out your retailers. Go put your hands on one or go to a local club or once again, check out YouTube and Google it, get some good ideas. Look for weather resistance where possible. There is a drone that can actually fly and then drop into a lake or a swimming pool and go under the water and then come back out. But it's not very good for a lot of other things. So it's just kind of a fun thing to have, but it does not compare to the more sophisticated heavy-duty drones. So, well, what's your need? Oh, by the way, crash guards, great thing to have at the very beginning if you're new to it. It's a must because you're going to run it into something. So what is your need? Fun, budget, beginners, serious. That will help point you in the direction for the kind of drone quality that you're looking for. The drone camera. So the drone cameras, that they have enabled us to access spaces and create compositions in fresh new ways. So from amateur to professional photography to weddings, travel, sporting events, these days it seems like drones are just being used everywhere. So good camera drones are powerful tools that have high definition camera capabilities for industry leading image quality. Sensor size is very important. ISO range, shutter speed, photography modes, and more will decide which bracket the camera drone will fit. A professional level camera drone will have a 1-inch sensor, and that's very important, by the way. When you get a 1-inch sensor versus anything less than that, it's magnificently more data for you to capture and also edit these photos for the most beautiful end result. So at least a 12 megapixel photograph and video in 4K or even 5.2K is perfect, and then shooting in RAW mode. So just a quick note for those that don't know about shooting in RAW mode. Basically what that means is most cameras shoot in RAW mode, whether they have a 1/2-inch size sensor, 1-inch sensor. And what RAW mode does, it gets everything that's out there. But when you look at your telephone camera or a nice Nikon or a Canon or something, anyway, a lot of times it gives you that picture back, but in JPEG. So what it did was took a raw picture of, let's say, 20 megabyte file and reduced it down to about a 5 megabyte file in the JPEG format, because it post-processed your photo to make it look prettier. But if you use a raw photo and then run it through things like Photoshop or Lightroom, my gosh, it's magnificent what you can do to a photo. And I'll show you an example in a minute. The 5.2K, by the way, that's the newest version coming out. But this particular drone that you see in this picture, it is a Hasselblad lens, and it has Hasselblad software, and that's why I chose it. It's the only one in the world that I know of capable of shooting Planet Series photography and National Geographic quality. Hasselblad bought 10% of the DJI company just so they could put their lens and software into this package. And does it ever pay off? So equally important is the gimbal quality. So aerial photography requires stabilization for capturing smooth footage during flight. And that's why we emphasize choosing a top quality gimbal. That's the thing that camera floats on, which that can reduce the shake that results from flight. Currently on the market, there's 2-axis and 3-axis gimbals, and going for the 3-axis gimbal will pay off. I have had my drone going 25, 30 miles an hour and brought it to a complete stop, sudden stop. And you'll see the drone kind of kick back in the air, and the fans reverse it pretty much and stop the drone in seconds. But when you play it back, you cannot tell that it did all that moving around because of the gimbal. Very powerful tool. The drone video used to be that either the video was good or the camera was good, but ever since they started improving the qualities of both, so the drone and the camera and the video have all joined hands and got better as time goes on. So the minimum quality that I recommend would be 720p. You'll be happy with that. A 1080p is better, just like a television. And then mine's 4K, and then here comes 5.2K. So, it depends on your budget. The better quality, of course, the better the picture. And once again, 3-axis gimbals are almost flawless videos. And by the way, there's the 1870 Lighthouse. That was a picture taken in fall. And we talked about earlier about portability. There's the $64 million drone, and that takes an airport tug to move that thing around. So the small foldable units are the newest trend. It makes it easy for hiking and backpacking, traveling. It's easy to assemble while on the go. And the days of carrying a large, heavy suitcase around is becoming very inconvenient. Example, the one in the top left, it does fit in the palm of your hand, but it won't do much. It probably runs 5 minutes, but it's fun. The top right picture is just some variations as they get bigger and more sophisticated. The 2 bottom pictures are the one that, like I have. So you can see in the bottom right picture, about all folded up, that's how big it is in your hand. In the bottom left picture is folded up, and then where the arms fold out. And at first I thought this thing was kind of a joke until I read up on it. And oh my gosh, it sold me right away on the quality and the camera quality as well as the motors. So let's talk about lighting for just briefly. There's a lot of things that you can change on your controller as you go up in the air. So whether it's bright or sunny, and that's the Presque Isle River up in the UP, but whether it's bright or sunny, or if it's shooting at sunset, and there's the Presque Isle near the lighthouse in the fall. You see the rich colors. You can change those settings right there on the fly. Or if you're going to shoot at night, there's Mackinac Bridge about 7 feet off the ground. Explore all your settings on that controller. You get to learn it, get to play with it. You can move your settings around on photos and video on the fly. And if you can, if at all possible, shoot in RAW mode. And by the way, if you have any questions on that, you want any further information, feel free to email me and I'll get you some more information. And by the way, if you remember that photo at the very beginning of the shelled out lantern room roof, that's the after effects of being repaired. Very beautiful paint job. Weather conditions, always keep your eye to the sky. Lightning strikes are up to 15 miles away, but just always be aware of your surroundings. It's not that lightning is going to strike your drone, but just be prepared to bring it in and get out of harm's way. And finally, we're going to talk about editing. So there's Photoshop and Lightroom and many other types of software out there. And so if you're asking yourself, why would I want to edit a photo? I think it looks pretty nice as it is. Well, there's an example of this was shot in RAW. And this, as you can see how it's kind of silhouetted in the foreground in a nice bright sunset. So when I hit this enter button, it's going to transform it into the post-production processing through Lightroom. And there it is. That's why you want to shoot in RAW. You have a ton of data to work with, and you can manipulate your colors, your sunsets. It goes on and on what the software can do. But that data, you might not know that all that's in that picture sitting there waiting to bring itself out. So once again, on the internet and the YouTube and the Facebook, there's incredible resources for making a purchase, for specifications, where to get repaired, different clubs and interest groups, tips, techniques, and technical information. Once again, there's the 1840 Lighthouse overlooking Lake Huron. So if we have time for some questions, I would also like to thank everybody on behalf of the Presque Isle Township Museum Society and our historical lighthouses for participating in this event that helps celebrate the 150th birthday of our lighthouse.
Well, thank you, Eugene. If anybody on Zoom would like to ask a question, feel free to unmute your mic or feel free to put it into the chat box. And if you're on Facebook Live, just type into the comments and we'll be monitoring those. Well, Eugene, I had a question about the noise level. How is it the noise level quite noticeable below, so many feet, or once you get up to 200 or 300 feet, it's not very noticeable?
That's correct. The particular drone that I have, they worked on the propeller integration with noise. So the original units were pretty darn loud. And then the newest ones, they've just redesigned the blades. So I've noticed at certain wind conditions that's even quieter close up. But once you start getting above 100 feet, it really starts getting quieter and quieter. But the early models, quite a buzz. So it does depend on wind conditions also, what it's having to fight. That depends on where it's going to tilt that unit. But you get up to 200 or 300 feet, you have trouble hearing it.
Out of curiosity, these are all fixed pitch props, right?
Yes, you would actually take they push down on the motor and then a little twist, and then they lock themselves in place. So they're really easy to just push in and lock in place, and then push back down, and then go counterclockwise and pull them back out. So it just takes moments to put all four props on and take them off, and that increases the portability.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So a question came up about cost. I know that, once again, they go from $10 to 64 million, but the one that I have, the first one that I got, I was in about the $60 to $80 range, and it was a great drone to practice on. There are some really good ones now in the $40 to $60 range, especially for just having some fun. The price of some of these units has also come down that have maybe a 4K video potential. But the one that I've got, that wound up running about $1,400, and then with a particular care package and some extra batteries, I wound up investing about $1,800 in it. So I'm a candidate for getting that insurance policy that puts an umbrella on it no matter what happens, and I just haven't done that yet. So at $1,400 base price, this is a unit that has outperformed some of the drones that were running around $3,000 plus. So, but since then, and the DJI Mavic Pro 2 is the one I have, it's a very superior unit. That's not to take away from anybody that has a unit that's doing them a great job. I just love the portability of mine and the 4K resolution, the 30-minute flight time, the 40-mile-an-hour speed, and the portability.
Okay, Eugene, we do have another question. You touched on it briefly in your last comment. What specific model do you have? I know I looked on the B&H photo and found your drone. They seem to have several different models. Which one is yours specifically?
Yes, mine is the Mavic 2 Pro. So the other one that looks exactly like it, almost exactly like it, is a Mavic 2 Zoom. And the reason I did not choose the Zoom was that it would actually zoom up on an object, but not very much. But the Mavic 2 Pro is the only one I knew of that had the Hasselblad camera, also has Hasselblad software, which I had never heard of, and it's a color enhancing software. And there's the example right there. We're looking at this Lighthouse. Just look at the color of that. You don't have to edit very much when you're doing a video. By the way, just to let you know, with the Mavic Pro 2, you can run a video at 4K, and then you can take your software that you can edit these files, and there might be between 10 and 30 separate photos in 1 second. So you take your arrow key and you tap through it, and you can watch your video at parts of a second at a time. That allows you to zoom into a very pretty picture and capture that single picture out of an entire video and print it or turn it into a photo.
Thank you. Any other questions?
That's what you're seeing?
There's a chat question. Can you see that yourself, Eugene?
I
can pull it up.
Yeah, I don't see that.
Okay, basically says, do you know if lighthouses prohibit the use of drones, or some lighthouses should photographers contact the lighthouse organization before drone photography?
Excellent question. I should have talked about that. So a lot of times they'll post a no drone zone picture. I was at Lake Kitchmakippy, and right there at the ranger station, it says no drones allowed. But most of the lighthouses don't have that warning. I'm sure they just ask everybody to be kind of observant of other people and be courteous. And like if somebody's climbed the tower, don't go and buzz them with your drone, or, try not to. But most of them do not have any warnings saying you can't run your drone there. Looks like all of them so far that I've run across have, go ahead, have fun with it. But just, you might ask. It probably pays to ask.
Okay, another question was, do the subjects in the videos have rights? And if I don't want to be recorded by a drone, can I demand that the videos be deleted?
I would. If somebody asked me that, they really actually don't have a right to tell you not to. But if somebody tells me that, I want to be compliant with them, and I definitely feel for their safety and their comfort, because if somebody puts something on Facebook, who knows what that could create? Maybe that person wasn't supposed to be there. Maybe they're trying to stay away from somebody that did them harm. So, but there's really not a legality that I have heard of yet. But I promise if somebody asked me that, I would just delete that or just edit it out and tell me you'll never see that on Facebook, or I'll get rid of it.
Yes, Dick. Has
Hey,
that been shared?
Dick, I was wanting to share some of these photos I took, and I had already pulled this up, but it's not coming up for viewing.
Well, you have to go, were they opening a photo viewer?
Yes.
Well, go back to the top of your screen and put in, click new share,
Okay.
and you should be able to find the photo viewing program you were using.
Huh. Yeah, this is the one I had set up, but we were not seeing it on.
Can you see it on your computer?
I see it on mine, but Katie doesn't see it on hers.
Does he see it?
Do you see it? Do you see this?
No, I
photo?
see your file folders.
Yeah, that's what she sees.
Oh, I think it is.
You don't, but you can see a single photo on your screen.
Right, and I can full screen it, and I had this up and running before we started, but it just didn't capture it for some reason.
I guess.
These photos are on our Presque Isle Happenings Facebook page, so if anybody wants to look.
Usually if you put new view, up at the top and do new share, it should be able to find it. Now we see you.
Yeah, there's me. Now, how do I get, so I go share screen. I'll try that again. Are you seeing, okay, let's try something.
Double click on that and see if it.
Yeah, it didn't show up on Katie's, it shows up on mine. It says I'm sharing it, but that's too bad. But for those participants listening in, it's on Facebook under Presque Isle Happenings or Eugene Cambre, my webpage, my Facebook page, or the one labeled 45 degrees and longitude and latitude. Sorry about that.
Any other questions for Eugene? Katie, have you any other questions on Presque Isle's Facebook page?
No, we just thank everybody for joining us. From what I can tell, we've got over 30 people involved in the webinar, and so we're really pleased with that. And thanks, Eugene, for a great job. So if you knew a lot or you knew a little, at least now you're going to go away and know a lot more. And his photography, Eugene's photography, is also available if you go to the Presque Isle Museum Society Facebook page. Quite a bit of his photography is there as well. And so I would definitely follow him because his imagery is absolutely gorgeous. And thanks everyone for joining us. And again, thank you to the Western Museum for hosting us here, and to Dick Bremer and the Association for Lifelong Learners with Alpena Community College, who's just a really a great gift to Northeast Michigan.
Well, from the Association of Lifelong Learners, we appreciate this opportunity, Katie, and Eugene, to team up with you folks and get to be very familiar with selecting drones and how to use them. So thank you, Eugene.
You're
If
most
there's no
welcome.
other questions, we will end the meeting here in about 5 seconds. Okay, great job, thanks. You got a lot of kudos on Facebook, Eugene, and on Zoom chat, so congrats to you.
Thank you very much. It was a lot of fun, and if we have to do it again, then it's probably going to get a little bit better, a little bit smoother than this one. I don't think I did too bad. I mean, I've rehearsed this thing. Okay, I
You
was
did fine.
pretty
You just
comfortable
had to
with it.
figure out how to get your photo viewer to show up on Zoom.
Yeah, that kind of surprised me because, but see, before I even opened up Zoom. Oh, still on? Okay. Did he? Yeah, I'm
Must
surprised.
be buried in one of those icons you're looking at.
Yeah, yeah. I would like to have, I just hope people will maybe shoot me an email and, you know, if they have any questions there, I could run that by them. Do you see that now?
Yeah, yeah.
I should have just hit that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing it.
Is anybody left to see this?
Yeah, there's a few people.
There's 5.
Okay, I'll just let that run for a few minutes. Okay. If they can hear me, this is this windsurfer here. I was pretty amazed by what he was doing, and then he came over to me and landed and asked me about the drone. This guy was older than me, and I'm 67. I'm like, how in the world are you out there in that 50-degree water and 30-mile-an-hour winds with?
He's incredible. I know who that is, and he's in incredible shape.
And his wife was out there with a stand-up paddleboard
He's
or
a
a sail.
doctor.
Wow. This is a sped-up video of the beach at the Presque Isle Harbor / Marina. So I did this in double speed, so you can kind of see the gorgeous colors that are out there in Presque Isle. And I never knew it was this beautiful. I thought it was gorgeous until I got the drone, and then, oh my gosh, you know, just every day out here is beautiful, even in the rain. But these spectacular colors out here in this part of Michigan. This is one of the most beautiful areas in America, and I've been all over the U.S. And I just, wow, it's easy to settle for Presque Isle. That's the old 1840. There's a sunset over. Saw just a glimpse of Grand Lake, but now this is the Lake Huron. Just an idea for colors, what the drones can pick up. And there's a lot of detail in these videos too with 4K. Sometimes you can see the lighthouse blink. This is a shipwreck in the lagoon at Besser Bell. And right offshore is the other part of the shipwreck. Pretty fascinating. This is the North Bay. Would you look at those colors?
Katie's home.
Yeah, Katie's home. North Bay at the Isthmus of Presque Isle. There's a pond that has formed due to the high lake levels. That was not there about 2 years ago. When I moved here, it was just a little bit, but not like that. There's the lighthouse in the background, the 1870. And here's the marina. And I don't remember if we can see the 1840 on this. Yes, there's the 1840. And we're coming across the Presque Isle Bay or harbor. The colors, my gosh, you'd think you're in the Caribbean. Unreal. And there's a lighthouse. So I just moved this drone around for people to see how to maybe line up a photo with your drone, move it around and get some different angles, different perspectives, different times of day. This happened to be a sunset where you can take a video like this and then you can freeze it and edit and turn it into a picture. And there we lined it up and illuminated the window. And just
Out of curiosity, Eugene, as we watch some of these, the videos seem to what I'll call cog around. Is that part of the camera action, or I'm trying to decide if this is a video delay from your computer through the internet?
Now, it's both. So sometimes when some of these settings, okay, when the battery gets low, and then some of the settings, there's a lack of perfect communication to that controller. For some reason, I get these glitches from time to time. And other times it's just perfectly smooth. So I really have to get in and dial in my drone even more and smooth everything out. But like you'll see some jumping here. But now when I've played that back, I did not get those. We're getting them now, but maybe I have some process running in the background on this computer, which would surprise me. Normally that's a very, oh, I sped these up. I'm sorry. I did speed these up, and that added to that little money jerking motion. But on regular speed, some of these are just super smooth.
Okay, thank you.
All right. That's it.
Thank you.
All
Woo!
right.
Good job.
Great job.
Thank you
Any
very
other
much.
further questions? Doesn't look like we got any on our Facebook page, so, and
Okay.
none on here. So with that, Eugene, thank you. And Katie, thank you very much for suggesting this joint program.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Or you all too. We'll sign
You
off
bet.
now.
Thanks, Dick.